Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, most merciful, most compassionate. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you this wonderful afternoon. Now, I know that the biblical tradition tells us of the miracles of Jesus. The Muslim tradition does too. One of those miracles, of course, is Jesus turning water into wine. I'm not sure, being a rather teetotal faith, whether the Islamic tradition includes that particular miracle on our list of Jesus' miracles. So today I've decided to raise a proverbial glass of an equally, maybe even more decadent drink than wine to Jesus, lassi. For the uninitiated, lassi is a thick, yogurty concoction that can be salty or sweet. I like it sweet. I like it sweetened with mangoes and cane sugar. I like it thickened with butter and a bit of cream. It's then shaken and made terribly frothy. It's a worthy drink. It's a worthy drink to raise to a man whose worth we cannot deny. But I have an admission to make. I admit to having had a slightly strained relationship with Jesus for many years. You, of course, will know the obvious. Jesus, son of Mary, is one of the preeminent religious figures of the Muslim tradition. A brother to Moses and Muhammad, the Christ, the Messiah, the Blessed, the son of the most blessed woman. None of this was never in doubt for me as a Muslim who was brought up in a faithful, believing home. Let me explain my dilemma. I went to state schools, we call them public schools in Canada, at a time when the Lord's Prayer was said every morning after the national anthem. I know the Lord's Prayer off by heart. O Father who art in heaven, and so on and so on. We'd intone it every morning. When I told my parents that, we say this Christian prayer at school, they reassured me and said, don't worry, son, the message of it is pretty consistent with Islam. As a Muslim, you don't have to worry about it too much, just kind of go with the flow. But a little bit, I was a little bit uncomfortable. Because in my mind, the reference to the Father implied the Son, and I knew that was where Christianity and Islam diverged. Now, a few of the schools I went to, and this, of course, would not happen today, there was a picture of Jesus in our classroom. The trouble was that Jesus looked something like some surfer hippie dude. Blonde, brownish hair, decidedly white. It always looked a little bit strange to me, a little bit out of place. He looked otherly, inaccessible. Jesus' whiteness was constantly reinforced, and it somehow didn't make sense. Jesus wasn't a European prophet. Indeed, he was kind of presented in these pictures as a white God. But God was without color, I had learned, without form, without ethnicity, without religion even. He was the creator of faith. Faith led us to him. He didn't follow a particular faith. But it was we, I felt, in some ways, who erroneously created gods or even prophets in our own image. He was my prophet, Jesus, but yet in these pictures he wasn't. And it wasn't until I read the autobiography of Malcolm X in 8th grade that the fiction of the white Jesus became ever more clear to me. For a young person, it was reassuring to know that the historical Jesus probably looked a bit like me, at least in complexion at least. Malcolm X, as some of you will remember, when he was in prison during his errant youthful days, challenged the priest at his prison and said, well, is Jesus actually white? Well, no, he's probably more African. He's probably black. He probably had curly hair and olive-colored skin. For this assertion of Malcolm's non-whiteness, Malcolm was censured and labeled a troublemaker. But the Jesus I have now grown to know and love since then was exactly that, wasn't he? A troublemaker, a rebel, an upsetter of apple carts and moneylenders' tables. The Jesus that is celebrated year and year at Greenbelt reminds me of that Jesus. And that's why I think I feel so much at home here. The prophet of troublemakers he is, and the prophet of the marginal and the rejected. The Quran, the holy scripture of Islam, mentions Mary, mother of Christ, in absolutely remarkable terms. The Quran describes her fortitude, her dignity, her belief, her faith, how she endured censure and gossip, having been a virgin woman carrying this mysterious, blessed child in her. In fact, the Quran is often impersonal about some of the stories of the prophets, but about Mary, mother of Jesus, the Quran is intensely personal. We're taken right inside her home. We're next to her as the angels and the prophets come, as she grapples with this amazing child that she is carrying in her. Few characters are drawn in such emotive or fine detail. Jesus appears also in the Muslim tradition in the words of the Prophet Muhammad, as well as narrations that are preserved in Islamic tradition. Many of them will remind you of the biblical tradition because I believe there is a connection between them and the Islamic tradition, clearly. I want to share some of those with you. Christ said, if you desire to devote yourselves entirely to God and to be the light of the children of Adam, forgive those who have done you evil. Visit the sick who do not visit you. Be kind to those who are unkind to you, and lend those who will not repay you. Jesus once, one of the Islamic traditions says that Jesus met a man and asked him, what are you doing? And the man said, I'm devoting myself to God. Jesus asked him, who is caring for you? My brother, replied the man. Jesus said, your brother is more devoted to God than you. This is a Jesus whose words for me mirror the words of all the prophets. In those narrations, which in the Islamic tradition are called the Israeliyat, in these Israeliyat, I find hope and I find wisdom and I find connection to Jesus, son of Mary. The Quran states beautifully, and in a nutshell, how I view Jesus. The Quran says about Mary, at length she brought the baby, Jesus, to her people, carrying him in her arms, and they said, O Mary, truly an amazing thing hast thou brought, of course, having not been touched by a man. And then Jesus speaks in the Quranic tradition from the arms of his mother, and he says, although he's a baby, I am indeed a servant of God. He has given me revelation and made me a prophet, and he has made me blessed wheresoever I be, and hath enjoined on me prayer and charity as long as I live. He, God, has been kind to my mother, and not overbearing or miserable. So peace be unto me the day I was born, the day that I die, and the day that I shall be raised to life again. It is this Jesus, I have to say, who has brought me close to my Christian brothers and sisters. It's this Jesus who has taught me to open and be embracing of other traditions. And it's this Jesus that continuously inspires me at Greenbelt to learn more and to engage more with all of you. Muslims are told that the Prophet Muhammad was carried on one blessed night to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. There he gathered, it is said, in our tradition, with all the prophets, his brothers. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Jesus, we are told, and prayed on the rock that now lies under the gold dome. It is an enduring image for me as a Muslim of the fraternal spiritual connection that we all share. And beyond the theology on which we may diverge, there is a message and a spirit that accompanies Jesus, that enduringly draws us together and unites us together, both in belief in God, but in action for God, in ameliorating the conditions around us that Jesus tried to ameliorate in his life, and Muhammad tried to ameliorate in his, and Moses tried to ameliorate before them. So today I raise the frothy concoction, my lassi, to Jesus, son of Mary. I raise the glass of lassi to Christ, the Messiah, the prophet of God. I raise today a glass of lassi in honor to the brother of Muhammad and Moses and Abraham. I raise a glass of lassi to a guide who guides me and who guides us all. He who called us to God through service and sacrifice. Since we all want prophets who look a little like us, I'd like to say I raise a lassi to the Jesus who looks a little like me. To Jesus. Thank you.